Okay, I would like to call the meeting to order. Welcome to the CCWD board meeting of Wednesday, November 13th. Would you all please rise and join me in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Rebecca, would you please call the roll?
Director Edelman.
Here.
Director Edwards.
Yes.
President Thomas.
I am here.
And Director Davidson and Cepeda are both absent.
Okay. At this time, we have public comment. Members of the public may address the board on any non-agendized item. The public is encouraged to work through staff to place items on the agenda for board consideration, and no action can be taken on matters not listed on the agenda. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. We have one public person here. Are you sure? You could be compelled to talk about something?
I already talked to Damon about what I want to talk about.
Okay, all right. Very good.
Got it?
Okay, next item on the agenda, item number 3, this is a consent agenda. These items are expected to be routine and non-controversial, and items can be acted upon by the board at one time without discussion. Any board member may request that an item be removed for later discussion.
I'd like to pull 3F.
Okay, with item 3F pulled, we have
Excuse me, 3C?
3C. Okay.
Okay, and I'll make a motion to approve 3A, 3B, 3D, and 3E.
We have a second on that?
Second? We only have 3.
I know, you're going to stay busy.
I better shut
Who's going to do it? Okay,
Be on your toes.
You have to be on your toes today. Okay, Rebecca, we have a motion and a second. Would you please poll?
Director Edelman.
Yes.
Director Underhill.
Yes.
President Thomas.
Yes. Okay, in item, or in sequence, would we please, what are your concerns about 3C?
The claim summary? Page number 1, I know we have district-wide tank inspections, and I reminder of how often we do that. That's a healthy amount of money, but I know we have lots of tanks. So how often are we?
We actually complete tank inspections annually. So we have, the tanks are on a schedule, and so certain tanks are inspected each year. And they're on a rotating schedule throughout the district.
Okay. And this is where we go in and determine whether or not we're going to have to refinish them or do treatment or whatever.
Correct. Yep, condition of the tank, internal, external inspections, and then we usually receive a report.
Right, because we do have to report that to the dam?
Additional drinking water, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yep, and we'll actually, we'll have an agenda item on the next engineering committee to discuss tanks as well.
Oh,
As a
okay.
result of some of the inspections.
Okay, Director Rademan, go ahead.
No, go.
If you're inspecting the inside of a tank, do you have to drain it, or do they do it with divers, or what?
Yeah, so the internal inspection is conducted with divers, and they're usually in a dive suit with an air hose, so they can actually talk while they're conducting the inspection, and so that report we get is usually narrated by the diver. So they might know, okay, we see an anomaly here with the coating, I'm gonna rub the coating now and see if it's bubbled, okay, this looks good, and we're gonna go to this next spot, and we're gonna inspect this rust mark and see if it's actual, okay, here's an exposure, something to take note of. A lot of our tanks, particularly clear wells at both Jenny Lynn and Copperopolis are in need of replacement. And so we have issues associated with the rafters of the tanks and the ladders, and we're just starting to see some advanced corrosion in a lot of our facilities, incidentally.
And the clear well is where?
The clear well is a storage tank of the finished product from the water treatment plant.
Oh, okay.
So it's usually on site at the water treatment plants. Jennyland actually has 2 clear wells. And so all the water that's treated goes through the final disinfection process, is stored in the clear well prior to distribution to the system.
Okay, so the water in the tank obviously has been treated, it's chlorinated and all that. Would that explain why I turned my faucet on and got a portion of a wetsuit that came out of the...
Yes.
So in all seriousness, it doesn't represent any possibility of contamination if a diver goes into the tank after?
No, the dive suits are actually disinfected prior to diver getting in the tank. And all the hose is disinfected throughout the dive as well.
Interesting. Jacques Cousteau, so
Yes, it's really interesting, actually.
I bet. Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah,
on-
I have one more, and this is on page 3, and this is the entry for Coleman Engineering, and this is the Ebbets Pass Techite Pipeline Replacement Project. And this has been on the books for so long, I'm just wondering, do we need to keep re-engineering and, modifying that? Is that what's behind that?
Yeah, so after we rejected all bids last year, we decided to go back and do some re-engineering to see if we could reduce the cost of the project. So that's what you're seeing there. Charles and his team have been working with the engineer to try to reconfigure and find some ways to bring the cost of the project down overall. We're going to have a meeting with our operators, provide some more input on that, and hopefully still be able to move that project forward next year in a different configuration, though, that reduces cost.
And so until we complete that, we'll be seeing it.
Yes. Yeah. Well, we know, as you know,
Yeah.
as well as anybody, it needs to be replaced. That hasn't changed. It's just a question of making sure we're doing it in the most cost-effective manner.
And, just as we're getting ready to go into winter, that is when it just breaks my heart to see the trucks there.
Unfortunately, it won't get done before winter.
Right.
But so one more winter, though, and then hopefully we will have it done next year.
Okay,
Any other questions?
thank you, that's it.
Do you have any questions
No.
go ahead. I just noticed that there's a lot of these, wildlife mitigation for the Forest Service and some of these fees. That's a big number too, $25,000. Is that just so that we can belong to their club, or what is the justification for that kind of a charge?
Those are for the power projects, so those are reimbursed by the CPA.
Oh, okay. All right.
Those are the ones where we move them to the water resources budget to show that they're there, and then they're balanced out again.
Okay. Don't go away. The 50 radio read meters for $14,000, that comes out to $286.34 each. Are these the meters that we've been talking about buying to put in service for our future switch over to all
page
radio
are you
read? This is page 4 of 8. It's about midway down, and it's to Ferguson Enterprises.
Yeah, so within the current budget, the district decided to purchase read meters instead of the manually read. So this is one brand of radio read meter. It is actually the same brand of manually read meter that we install currently. So to basically to remain current with the brand, we just went ahead and purchased what we use now. However, in the future, with the project, that potentially could change. Ideally, the project moves forward with what we have in the ground currently and what we're putting in the ground to replace failed manually read meters.
Okay, well, the reason I bring it up is that struck me as being almost $100 more than I had anticipated that the meters would be. So is that,
Yeah, I think that's in line with what all of the different brands will be, about $275 to $300 per radio red meter.
okay. All right.
Well, just on the same subject, radio read meters, on the same page down about 4 or 5 from the bottom is Golden State Flow Measurement Inc. And it's one radio read meter for $760, or is that?
That is a larger, so we have an 1.5 meter at a location that is really hard to get to, and it's given us issues in the past. And so with the current reading equipment that we have, this allows us to just drive by that meter now. And so we figured rather than fight with the property owner to try to get a meter read every other month, and it's in a marshy area, and if it's flooded, we can't go read the meter. So we thought this would be a more cost-effective way to get our read every time we are out there to actually read the meter. It's automatically populating in our meter reading device.
Okay. Interesting.
And so that happens to be a meter type that's compatible with the handhelds that we have. So the one brand that we install is not compatible with the handhelds that we have to be read via radio, to be read via drive-by. But this other brand is. So we're working in 2 different brands right now. One is to facilitate radio reads currently for some nuisance and problem locations, and then the other is to just wholehearted meter replacement associated with the brand that we currently use.
Thank you.
All right. We need a motion on C.
Move to approve?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Would you poll on that item, please?
Director Rutherford?
Yes.
Director Ennis?
Yes.
President Thomas?
Yes.
Okay, I wanted to pull 3F, just I realize that Robert Creamer is no longer employed here, and we're recognizing him a little past the fact. But I just wanted to be able to say some kind words about working with Robert. I wish he was here to acknowledge all his help with, especially in dealing with properties that we own, and pulling maps. It seems like I've been working with Robbie since I got here in 2011. He's been very, very helpful. Just a nice person, easy to get along with, and in a lot of our closed sessions, talking about properties and excess properties that we have. We formed a property committee a couple of years ago to study that, and he was very, very helpful in that whole process. Sorry to see him go, but I'm glad he's able to get into retirement, and I wish him well.
Might I just say along those same lines, Robbie was so precise about information that he had to share with the board. I mean, he didn't miss a trick, because he knew that we would be answering him. All these pretty sharp directors would be ready for us. But no, he was just adequate, more than adequate investigation and preparation is what I really recognize with Robbie. And so, yes, another one, retiree, and so I wish him well.
It's really kind of remarkable when you think about some of the institutional memory that he takes with him. Doggone it, I always knew that I could get the history on almost any subject from Robbie, because he had it all. I think it's also worthy of mentioning that he had a significant role here in the leadership position for the union. He was union president before I got here, but I know that his efforts in that regard were very much appreciated by the employees of the organization. So I would like to read this resolution, if I may. How about that? This is number 2019 what?
77.
Okay, this is a resolution number 2019-77, a resolution of the Board of Directors of the Calaveras County Water District recognizing the retirement of Robbie Creamer. Whereas Robbie Creamer has faithfully served the board and ratepayers of Calaveras County Water District for the past 13 years, and whereas Robbie has held several positions with the district, including several levels within the engineering technical position, the supervisor for the district's technical service department, and most recently served as the district's engineering analyst. Whereas Robbie worked on several projects to the betterment of the district's engineering department, including the development of the district's website, mapping, and GIS system. Whereas Robbie has worked on several projects outside of the engineering department, including the epic move from the district's old building on St. Charles Street to its current location, including the setup of organization of the new building, and whereas Robbie has worked with the district's customers, developers, and consultants on a daily basis, all while ensuring district policies and procedures were adhered to, and whereas Robbie's assistance and knowledge with resolving standard and unusual land easements and encroachments will be sorely missed. And whereas Robbie is known for his love of hot sauce, the hotter the better, now therefore it be resolved, the Board of Directors of Calaveras County Water District hereby commend Robbie Creamer, engineering analyst, for his 13 years of dedicated service with the district. Be it further resolved, the Board of Directors and co-workers wish Robbie the best in his upcoming retirement, wherever his travel or his untraveled road may lead him. And this is passed and adopted on the 13th day of November 2019 by the following vote. Somebody make a vote.
Make a motion that we accept resolution number 219-77, recognition of Robert Creamer for his service with CCWD.
And I second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Would you please poll on that?
Director Benedict?
Yes.
Director Underhill?
Yes.
President Thomas?
By all means. And Robbie, if you're looking, we miss you.
There is no by all means, it's just yeas or no's.
What? Yeas or no's?
Can I just add, President Thomas, I certainly echo the board's comments. Robbie's, wealth of knowledge, expertise, institutional knowledge, all of it. And I'm glad President Thomas mentioned his role with the union, because that was one of the points I was going to make, was he was also a very strong advocate for his fellow coworkers. And I know they had a lot of respect for him in that role. I had a lot of respect for him in that role as well. So he will be sorely missed, and we wish him the best in retirement. So thank you for approving the resolution.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's appropriate, since we pulled this off the consent calendar, if any employees would like to make any comments regarding Robbie's tenure here and their interaction with him, this would be the right time to do it. Good catch.
I greatly appreciate you pulling the agenda item and giving Robbie the recognition that he deserves. He's been, I've enjoyed working with him over the past 13 years, and he originally came here along with Steve Hutchings,
Right.
many years ago, and he's going to be sorely missed. I'll have to figure out how I'm going to fill his shoes. It's been nice having his expertise and support for the engineering department. So, he's a good guy too, just in general. So, thanks much.
Okay, thank you, Charles.
Charles.
Okay, if there are no further comments, let's move on to item number 4, new business. We have 4A, the discussion and direction of the fiscal year 2019-20 first quarter investment report. And we have presenting that Rebecca Callen.
So this is just the quarterly investment report. We bring you the monthly investment information, so this is just a summary of the through September.
I have one question for you. You've been here for a couple of weeks now, and you've had a chance to dive into all these investments and find out where the money is. And are we okay? We're fine. Okay, that's good.
And so, taking on this new assignment or this new job, and it's something that you know, of course, otherwise you wouldn't be here, but, have you had a chance to look at, some of our procedures and,
I've been going through a lot of the procedures, specifically focusing a lot on the accounting and some of the policies that are in place that would directly impact accounting and customer service. So, I've been meeting with staff and kind of getting the background and how we are, what the basis was for the policies, determining if there's room for changes, best practices change, environments change. So
Right.
we're looking at, areas that might help streamline or help protect the district a little bit more. And just, not changing for the sake of changing, but changing for
For
the benefit to the district overall.
betterment and improvement and what have you. Are you happy with your quarters? Is there anything else we can do for you?
Your barracks? Okay.
Quarters. Is that a financial term?
Quarters and nickels.
Well, thank you and welcome.
No, that's great. That's great to hear, Rebecca. That your quarters are okay. Also, but that you're looking at the policies that affect your job, and that's fantastic. I mean, I'd like to see if there are changes. And you're right, not for the sake of change, but to make things more up to date with what should be doing, or just different policies, different way of looking at things. I'd like to see if any changes need to, or that you recommend that they come to us. That'd be great.
The reason that I'm very interested in you being forthcoming and honest about your assessments and stuff is if anything goes wrong, we're the ones that get blamed. So, so keep your eye on stuff.
I definitely keep my eye on everything, so I'll make sure, and then obviously if I see anything that I have questions, that are not, don't settle with me well, and obviously, communicating with Michael and, deciding, what's the background, what's the basis, was this expected, anticipated, so, and this is my fourth week?
I think so.
Fourth
Yeah.
week, so I'm not an expert on everything here, but I'm working towards it.
I'm just, have another question. We're used to accepting, the financial report in a certain, design. Have you even looked at that and,
Yeah, so at the county, I was on the Treasury Oversight Committee there, and it was organized a little bit differently. We had our internal accounts that were internally managed, so that would be like our LAIF account, which was internally
right,
managed
right.
by our treasurer. And then we had an external financial manager that would handle kind of some more robust investment opportunities. That's something that I'm going to be looking at as well. I need to kind of pencil it out. We might be able to make more, but it might cost us more on the administrative side. So I just need to kind of balance that and figure out if that makes sense for this district. And given the size of our portfolio, and obviously I don't want to put the resources that we have at any risk for loss. So I think slow, steady investment returns are really what we want to do. We don't want to lose anything. It would be great if we could gain a little bit more, but those are things that I'm looking into as well.
Awesome.
You look at the return, the interest that we're earning on the LAIF accounts, and it does seem fairly not insignificant, but like you say, it's secure. But when you compare it to the vulnerability. I mean, Lehman Brothers was getting just glowing reviews right up until the day before they closed. So, well, there's another spot here where maybe we can talk about the money that we've been getting the last 2 months from Lehman Brothers. One, 17,000 and then 19,000. That's, is there a sunset anticipated on that? Or?
That I'm not sure, and also we're gonna be looking into that.
Okay. All right.
I'd like to move for acceptance of the district's quarterly cash and investments report.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Would you please poll?
Director Reniger?
Yes.
Director Enrico?
Yes.
President Thomas?
Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Okay, moving on to 4B. This is discussion and action regarding the agreement for qualified labor between the Calaveras County Water District and the Utica Water and Power Authority. And Michael, you'll be making this?
Yeah, no action necessary from the board. I don't think this is more of an update as to an agreement that we worked out. We had an equipment share agreement that was less formal, that we'd had some success with in the past. And so we saw an opportunity to ramp that up to leveraging labor as well. We felt like because personnel are involved, we needed a more formal agreement. And so that's the MOU that's in the packet. Kind of viewing this as a trial run to make sure it works for both agencies and to make sure both agencies receive a reciprocal benefit from it. But the overall gist of it is, at times, the water agencies need some additional labor. It can be hard to find qualified labor, even especially when you just need a few extra bodies. You're not necessarily looking to hire a contractor for a big project. And really in the county, most of the qualified labor is working for other water agencies. And so the situation that presented itself here was the Utica outage, flume reconstruction work. They were really up against the start of the outage with not enough labor. We had some construction workers that were willing to do it. We were able to accommodate it with our work schedule, and so it's so far working out. And then we will receive the benefit of some of the Utica employees on projects where we need a few extra bodies. We have no shortage of those. So we're not exactly sure the timeline and which projects that will be for, but we have a lot of road work that we know we need to try to get done before the winter storms. There's the possibility of bringing an electrician over. Our electricians could use some help. So there's a lot of opportunities, I think, there to augment each other's workforces. And the hope is that this is successful and that this could serve as potentially as a model for other agencies, between us and other agencies, or between other agencies amongst themselves. So we're in the second week of the Utica outage right now, and for most of that time, we've had two guys working with them. I spoke to Kyle Rasmussen last night, their water conveyance supervisor, and he's been really, really pleased. And we talked about their work coming our way as well. So so far it looks like it's working out, but we just need to monitor it going forward and make sure that we're not short-staffed during these times, and vice versa, and that the scheduling works out, and see how it goes, see how it plays out going forward.
I'm curious as to what size pool they have. What are the number of employees?
It's much smaller. Yeah.
Well, I know, yeah, but
So they have 10 employees.
Oh, do they?
But of those, the number that we would draw from, probably half of that potentially.
But that's enough.
But they have,
yeah.
in terms of skill level and they have some highly skilled workers. So that's what we would benefit from, I think.
Do you anticipate in sending them an invoice, getting a check, or just exchanging labor through the year at some point? I mean, we got guys working for them now, and you're anticipating sometime in the next 8-12 months, they're gonna have a couple guys working for us?
Yeah,
As
I would
opposed
hope it
to-
wouldn't drag out that long. I don't anticipate a check, but the way that we wrote the MOU was either or. Because we need to make sure, obviously, that this isn't a handout. So if they're not able to return the labor in the same quantity, then they have the option of paying, paying instead. But the hope is here that we'd be able to leverage each other's workforce. That's basically a fallback option if that doesn't work out for some reason.
I think it's a fantastic idea. I mean, it's sharing of labor. It is, and there's a lot of other utilities in the same boat, and I'm not quite sure how to tap that resource. I mean, we're all also, in having our mechanics do work on their vehicles as opposed to other utilities taking their vehicles for to an outside shop. There's a lot of things that can be done in this arena, and this is a great way to start. I'd like to see it work with more utilities in Calaveras County. CPUD, Valley Springs PUD. I mean, there's a lot of and a lot more to tap. I think if the idea moves forward.
Any union concerns that, are we under
Not-
the same?
Nothing that, we definitely had that discussion, and there's nothing in the MOU that would prevent this. There were some concerns. I mean, I wouldn't even characterize it
Call it a
necessarily as
concern.
concerns that I heard, but just questions about, what this was, and, making sure that, safety was going to be, similar levels of safety and worker protection and things like that. But outside of that, no major concerns.
You said it's not an action item, but the agenda item in the
Calls for a
packet
motion.
does call for a motion.
Does it?
Wouldn't you like our formal approval of what you did without us knowing about it? So-
I would love that. Okay, sure. That's better than formal disapproval. Yes.
That was my point.
That's yet to be seen. We haven't voted on it yet. I'd like to make a motion for approving the agreement for qualified labor between CCWD and Utica Water and Power Authority.
And I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Rebecca, would you please poll?
I'm thinking hard on this one.
Do we want public comment? Do we want public comment?
Public comment on that?
Yeah.
That's a good thing I didn't vote.
Good thing you didn't vote, yeah.
Keep getting up back there.
Well, you said earlier you didn't have anything to
Yeah.
say.
That was earlier on the public comment, not this one.
Okay.
Okay. Michael, you mentioned equipment earlier in your discussion on this. Could you give me an example of that, please?
I can give you an example. We had some CCWD has some road grading equipment. Utica needed to do some work on their roads. And it was another situation where it was a hard time finding a contractor that would do it within the time frame that they needed it. They were able to borrow our road grading equipment, and we're able to utilize they have a Bobcat with a masticator for some vegetation control.
That's the one I was hoping I was going to hear, was that last part. Okay, and Bertha mentioned the union. Is UWPA part of the same union?
No,
They're not.
they're non-union. That's right.
They're non-union. Okay. And I think that's it. I read over the whole thing. Truly, I was a little surprised by it, but it's awesome. And I hope we come up with more ideas like this.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Any further
Yeah,
public comment?
Yes.
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 Where'd that come from?
It's my radio voice. Okay, moving on to item 5, old business. We have an update on actions of the East Side Groundwater Sustainability Agency and JPA. Peter Martin.
Thank you. This is just part of my routine updates on the status of the groundwater sustainability plan and the actions of the Joint Powers Authority and the Groundwater Sustainability Agency. Been talking to you about this for nearly 2 years, more. I think I've been working on this since I've actually, it's been closer to 4 or 5 years, we're at the finish line as far as the groundwater sustainability plan. We hit the target dates, the public review is over, and we're getting prepared for adoption. And so that'll be the bulk of what we'll talk about today, just preparing you for our public hearing next month to adopt the plan. So just a quick reminder, the final plan was posted on November 5th. That incorporated edits necessary as a result of the public comments that were received. And the November 13th board meeting happening today at this time is back on track. They had kind of moved around some of the dates to accommodate a series of ad hoc meetings and things that were going on in the build-up, because there was quite a bit of back and forth once the public comment period ended to get to a final document. I just want to remind you that the Proposition 68 funding grant was approved by the Joint Powers Authority. The proposal is there's a $500,000 eligible in this round of funding for the development of groundwater sustainability plans. The group put together a package of tasks that could be supported by a grant. That includes $50,000 for administration of the agreement, which, just kind of the cost of keeping a grant going. And then equipment and monitoring acquisition and expansion of that monitoring plan. And then also some data management system refinement for a total proposal of $575,000. So there's a $75,000 cost match associated with this as well. Prop 68 has a 50% cost match normally for this type of thing, but given that the area is a disadvantaged communities within the entire basin, there was a waiver for that, so the cost match is reduced. So talking about next month, going to be a lot of movement by all the individual groundwater sustainability agencies. While the Joint Powers Authority was working to develop a groundwater sustainability plan, all the individual groundwater sustainability agencies are required to adopt that plan individually by the statutes from the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. And the way that the East Side Groundwater Sustainability Agency is constructed under a memorandum of understanding, that means each individual agency of the East Side GSA needs to adopt it as well. So we will be adopting the plan at our regularly scheduled board meeting on December 11th. Calaveras County will go on December 10th, Stanislaus County as well, and Rock Creek Water District will go on the evening. Oh, that's a typo there, I'm sorry, it's 6 p.m. on December 11th. So I was asked to attend the Calaveras County Board of Supervisors meeting for that date by Brian Moss, but he'll be giving the presentation, so we'll be there to support them as well. I'm going to try to make it to Rock Creek's just to make an appearance. I don't know. Let them know that.
Yeah, they're the ones that only have what?
They don't really have a groundwater interest.
Right, right.
They have about 1,800 acres in production, and their water supply comes from the Salt Springs Reservoir. I think their interest mostly was just to keep apprised of what's going on in the region, and for the most part, Stanislaus County staff have shouldered the burden of keeping them going.
So will that meeting be out at the ranch?
It will be, yeah, it's at their regularly scheduled meeting time out at the, sorry, I forgot the last name.
Orbis.
Orvis Ranch, thank you. Yeah.
If you're in the living
Highway
room,
4, yeah.
if you're in the living room, look at the fireplace. I built it about 50 years ago.
I'll make sure I mention that if I go.
Okay, all right. Is this the right time to ask a question about what the counties, what are they, our county, are they positioning themselves to take a more official role in all this, or?
I think that's still a work in progress, but I think there's been some positive meetings with the CAO and our general manager about starting to take a more active role. I just don't think that we have anything constructed yet. Is that accurate, Michael?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is where the rubber really hits the road. While we're getting to the point where we've got a plan ready to be adopted, that plan needs to be implemented. And it's a 20-year implementation time frame, and there are costs associated with the implementation of the plan and the administration of the plan during that 20-year time frame. And so this is where people get really sensitive and when it comes to talking about money. So there has been an ad hoc meeting that's been meeting regularly to discuss what implementation consists of, what tasks are going to be involved in that, and then how to split up those costs as well. So that ad hoc committee was conceived by the Joint Powers Authority and created by the Joint Powers Authority. They've been meeting regularly, and advisory committee input was provided at the last few meetings on the outcomes of that committee. And I was at those advisory committee meetings. So there was an opportunity for that advisory committee to comment perhaps on that ad hoc committee, but just know that ad hoc committee is not reporting to the advisory committee. They're reporting directly to the Joint Powers Authority Board. So here's what we discussed at the last meeting. I just want to remind you that nothing has been set in stone at this point. But right now, the Joint Powers Authority has enough money to get them through the end of the year we're actually really like February, when the plan is submitted to Department of Water Resources. So the discussion is about what the annual costs will be for keeping the Joint Powers Authority going. And so they reviewed sort of a range of scenarios for how those costs would be shared and looked at the tasks that will be necessary over the next few years. Just to point out too, that they are being very conservative with their estimates and that they're trying to make sure that they're capturing everything. If there was a way to reduce costs, there are opportunities. So this is kind of just taking a big picture view of what the cost could be. So, it's not exact. So they reviewed the tasks associated with plan administration, outreach, review of water quality, and the applications for basin-wide grants as well. As I mentioned previously, there's a Zone 2 fund in San Joaquin County. That is a assessed property tax that supports groundwater and flood control projects in that county. Calaveras and Stanislaus counties don't pay into that Zone 2 fund, therefore we will not be able to access those funds for the purposes of offsetting our costs for this work. And then, of course, there's some remaining items that are associated with the model refinements. As time goes on, we'll continue to collect more data, refine the model, and the 5-year plan update, which is required. So every 5 years, the plan needs to have a comprehensive update as well. So they looked at a whole slew of different varieties of costs and factors, including just kind of looking at even splits, total acreage, pumping considerations, ability to pay was considered. That was a little controversial because really, who's going to tell you that they have the ability to pay? And total water use and population were all considered as a variety of possibilities of factors on how this cost could be allocated. So the ad hoc kind of came up with a hybrid approach, and they talked a lot about how it could just having an even split among the 16 GSAs for the water quality review. And then the monitoring would be completed by the individual GSAs through in-kind, funding or work. So for instance, CCWD maintains the CASGIM monitoring wells. That would be considered an in-kind contribution. It would not be shouldered by the other GSAs. Same goes for Stanislaus County. They have the same program over there. And then annual reporting would be covered by Zone 2 funds for those areas in San Joaquin County. And, obviously, the East Side Groundwater Sustainability Agency would be removed from that. And then, of course, the model refinements, that was where the real costs are going to come. And the 5-year update, that's going to be the expensive part, because you're going to have to completely look at the plan all over again. And those are going to be based on the percentage of total pumping and total population. So that was the hybrid approach. So some of it's split evenly for those tasks that seem to make sense, that they're split all across all the groundwater sustainability agencies. And then with regards to the modeling refinements and the 5-year update, those are more targeted towards the actual use of the groundwater basin and the enjoyment of the groundwater basin. So.
Peter, I'm looking at this comparison of cost allocation methods, and you got the yearly, these 3 columns, but looking specifically at your highlighted East San Joaquin GSA, it's fairly consistent at 45, 42, and 53, but isn't there an internal matrix that would be applied to that?
Yeah, I didn't include that in my presentation, I'm sorry, but in the past, we've shared costs by the East Side GSA 50-50 between the 2 counties, and then a further split on the Calaveras side between the county and CCWD. So, imagining a scenario where that current configuration continues, CCWD responsible for a quarter of the $45,000 per year.
So it's 50-50, once you do the 50-50 split between Stanislaus and Calaveras, then it's 50-50 between the county and the district.
Yeah, and this all probably needs to be codified in a more formal arrangement at some point, and that one thing we did do was try to hit the pause button. We had several meetings with the GSA agencies to talk about what the future looks like beyond this MOU. The MOU was really structured only to get us across the finish line and allow us to apply as a GSA. But over time, we may want to create a more rigorous structure with our own, perhaps Joint Powers Authority or some structure like that, and then have some governance associated with that where there's more routine meetings that are noticed between the 2 areas. So I think that is to come, but we wanted to make sure we didn't create confusion at the last minute while we're trying to get this groundwater sustainability plan approved. So.
Is Stanislaus County, are they in favor of that 50-50? They're not going to, in turn, they don't have an opportunity to have a 50-50 split with the water district that's in their county, so they're going to be taking on a larger chunk than anybody of the 4 agencies involved. Is that a point of contention, or?
They, for whatever reason, agreed to pay for the share of Rock Creek Water District. They could have requested that they split that, but it's always been very clear that the 2 acreages between Calaveras and Stanislaus counties are very similar, and a 50% split between the 2 counties made a lot of sense. And so that was just what was contemplated at the time when we formed the GSA.
Although the acreage might be equal, there's no comparison on the potential pumping.
That's accurate, yeah. And so these are things that we need to perhaps discuss long-term. I think this was just, when we created a multi-agency GSA, the idea was that we would try to create some equivalency amongst all the 4 partners. But, as time goes on, there may be more efforts on the Stanislaus side that we should perhaps contemplate that maybe they shouldn't be shared equally.
I don't know how you put a quantitative value on it as far as dollars, but what Walter Ward, the fact that he's working on this one and 5 others, he brings a lot of wealth of information to the table that, if you were paying for his expertise, it would be a lot of money, I think, so.
We had a talk with him too. He doesn't seem to be in any hurry to retire, so at least we'll have him for a while, hopefully. And so he told Michael and I he didn't know what he'd do if he retired. So,
He's a remarkable guy.
yeah.
Talk with him.
We keep kind of throwing out money. Our budget, impact to our budget, and are we looking ahead at inclusion of this
It's always been
for
included.
next? Yeah.
It's been included from the beginning.
So, yeah, this would probably have to fall into the next fiscal year, or we're going to potentially go over. As I mentioned, it was kind of a surprise to a lot of the agencies, the last meeting, when they told them that they're going to be out of money in February, because everyone else works on the fiscal year, so there was some frustration with that, within the group, because, small agencies, others, we all work on a similar fiscal year typically, either on the water year, on the October side of things, or in June, July to June. And I think it caught a lot of people off guard. So I don't know what's going to happen in between February and June. But, I think most agencies perhaps are not going to be able to pay before that their budgets are figured out for next year. So there's some issue there. But nothing is set in concrete at this point. This was just a report out. The board has not made a decision at this point, and they know they have to make a decision, but these options seem to create a lot of fairness. I printed out a couple extra copies of larger formats for you to have too as well. I don't know if those made to you, but as you can see, that Stockton East and the city of Stockton are heavily weighted for some of the things like the 5-year update, so therefore their shares are a lot more expensive, and it's based on the population in those service areas and their pumping and water use. So, you can see if they were to do the 50-50 split on certain things, they would have to contribute more. But, there's a little bit of a smoothing. The different options didn't impact the Eastside GSA's contribution that much. It's just we're mostly making up that large amount that needs to be backfilled where Zone 2 would come in for all the other agencies in San Joaquin County.
And I'd just reiterate what Peter already mentioned, that the MOU for the Eastside GSA is something we're going to have to renegotiate basically at this point, and what it is going forward. We talked about whether we would do that in advance of the adoption of the plan. It seemed like, and I think it was the prudent decision to let's get through this first, let's get the plan approved. But then we probably immediately on the heels of that, we need to sit down with the other members of the GSA and discuss cost allocation going forward.
Yeah, I think when we had that meeting at Downey Brand's offices, maybe perhaps a couple months ago, it was very clear that all agencies felt that the MOU as it is insufficient to support the GSA long term. So there's templates out there for how we can configure this. The creation of a new joint powers authority comes with fiduciary responsibilities and things like that. So I'm not any rush to take the responsibility of managing the Joint Powers Authority. That's an option, but there may be other configurations too that don't rely, but have a more rigorous governance structure, some sort of a governing board for the Groundwater Sustainability Agency long-term. Because at some point, the GSA is going to be forced to make financial decisions like this as to contributions towards the planning efforts. And so we want to make sure that the right people are at the table and that they're represented in a governance structure that makes sense going forward and for all the agencies too. So.
At the beginning of all this, Peter, I was, maybe I was deluding myself, but I was thinking that there were some opportunities, future opportunities for monetizing, call it excess water or unfound water or something, that if the district could find water, that wasn't already allocated. Some of these downstream areas that are pumping more than they're putting back in, that we could sell the water. Have those opportunities essentially dried up, or are they
Things
still
have
there?
changed recently with some new legislation that came out that allows for agencies to apply for essentially water rights, temporary water rights permits for high flows during storm events. And you can imagine that Stockton East would really, want to jump on that because they need more water to sink into the ground. They have a big hole over their, over their basin, their part of the basin. That is a shared water resource between CCWD and Stockton East. So we definitely would want to make sure that we get some sort of credit for those excess flows that are coming out of New Hogan and through our county. So that's an example of where it may not be monetized directly, but there needs to be some acknowledgement and shared acknowledgement of our contribution to the deficit of the basin. So I think there's an opportunity there. Given that the state board has created a new permitting process. Yeah, we've got to come up with some ways, and we can come up with those in a different forum than in public. But I think there's some opportunities there, given that the state has started to move in a different direction, recognizing the importance of trying to take advantage of surplus flows during storm events. So Stockton East has the facilities, the water resources are jointly shared. So.
Okay.
And I'm curious about the, I can remember when you first rolled this out, and how much interest has the level of interest been steady? I mean,
I think folks are a little tired of it.
Yeah,
I think there's some challenges. It's so technically dense, and incorporating the layman into this effort and getting the right outreach out has been challenging. They've held a lot of workshops, and farmers and other folks came, and
yeah, we attended one.
Yeah.
And that was a long time ago.
and so those were routine updates. They just hosted them all throughout the area, and you had some interest, but most people left confused, I think, in most cases. I think that work is going to still continue. I mean, it's being discussed as part of this total budget, and I think it will take a substantial amount of effort. But yeah, I think once we get this figured out with the county, I think it would probably be useful to do some targeted outreach to landowners, just to let them know that this is going forward, and it's still it's an adaptive process, right? I mean, talking about a 5-year review, the first 5 years are really gonna I don't think there's gonna be much in the way of hard actions by any of the agencies. It's more an opportunity for us to continue to gather data and make sure we have an accurate representation of the entire basin. But 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, there may be some things that happen in the basin, depending upon how things go, if there's droughts and, continued overdraft.
I think it's a really good question. I think it's hard to get people excited about a planning process, especially one as technical as this one. But I think part of the reason is nobody has really felt the impact of it yet. But over the next, it'll start over the next 5 years. But then as this gets implemented, it is going to have a major impact on land use in California and on the economy of California. And that is when it will really attract people's attention.
Yeah, and I think what really brought the county, and thanks to Dennis Mills, or Supervisor Mills, was the fact that the alternative is to have the state come in and slap a meter on everybody's well, right, or at least the larger wells, the ones that are above 2 feet a year. And the county and CCWD did not want state intervention in our affairs, and if you go that route, it's nothing more than basically a set program to reduce flows and conservation during times when water isn't available. And this allows for this county to be a part of a planning process that can change and is malleable depending upon the conditions, it's just this very strict curtailment, program essentially. So, I think probably we need to tell people that the alternative, if we didn't step in and take on this role actively, was not a pretty one. And so that's probably a good message to get out there too. So.
Well, is Valley Springs PUD going to find themselves in that position? Because they've been stonewalling from the beginning. So.
Yeah, we did incorporate what data we could from their available reports and things like that. So,
but they didn't offer them up voluntarily.
And there have been multiple attempts to reach out to them by the consultant. They had a call with their outside help engineer from Weber Geo, and it didn't really seem to make them want to do anything.
Yeah, they didn't recognize the importance of it, and
Yeah, well, so we documented that outreach to them. They can't say they weren't aware at this point. I offered on several occasions to go and give presentations to their board and received no response, so.
Okay. Any other questions? No. Does that conclude your report, Peter?
Yes, thank you for sticking with me on that.
Okay.
Thanks, Peter.
well, thank you, Peter.
Thanks for all your effort in that regard. Okay. We have 5B now, an update regarding the district's new operations maintenance facility. Kevin Williams.
No. Yes, please. Hi.
Welcome back, Kevin.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So I was going to give an update on our plans for this, our new operation and maintenance facility that'll be here on the property. It is going to give a centralized location for our equipment, and maintenance, and warehouse storage areas. We're handing out the preliminary site plans right now, and the floor plans and the elevations. The location, we looked at the property out here and we tried to come up with a location that best utilize the property for future expansion. So we came up with the area right out here in the south west corner of the property. There's some big challenges with existing conditions there. We got the sloping topography, natural drainage, and the seasonal creeks that flow through the site. So the first task will be to do some grading and drainage improvements, and along with utility improvements for electrical, fire, water, and septic. So the handout I gave you, the first drawing is the warehouse shop site plan. The area in the gray is a paved area, and then we got an entrance up here to the east of the property, with a little drainage area here for the site drainage. The next sheet you have here is the preliminary floor plan. This is the facility we're looking at is a 60 by 160. It provides 3 service bays for equipment maintenance. We think this is a cost-effective consolidation of our facilities that are spread out throughout the county right now. Currently, we're spending $36,000 a year on a rental maintenance facility over here down the road. And it's also be a long-term storage area where we can keep our equipment and vehicles. Right now, we got them mainly at Hunters and Jenny Lynn, which are kind of in the extreme corners of the county. It allows the headquarters staff to better coordinate with the mechanics on a daily basis. And also, you can see from the floor plan here that it provides some areas for the field staff, operation, maintenance, and electrical staff to, when they come to the main office, a place for them to set up and do paperwork that they'll need to do. The warehouse space, It's kind of an open area here. It's got the roll-up doors on both sides, so you'll be able to drive trucks through here and load them with a forklift inside the building. It would maintain our normal parts storage for the necessary parts that we have on a daily basis. And also, we could store future materials for future jobs there in a secure facility. We can also monitor the materials more cost effectively. We can buy the materials and have them in one area instead of having them spread out throughout, and maybe we have multiple of the same items or different things, you know. And we can maintain a stock, so if we have an emergency, a water line break or something like that, we can have the materials on hand that we need. It takes the burden off the crews for maintaining the inventory, making sure they have all the parts and materials they need.
Might I ask a question at this point? How will you incorporate Ebbets Pass in here? You know, because
Well, this
of the
would be the-
distance, you know, the distance is the biggest factor.
Yeah, I know, I live up there, so I'm familiar with the distance but yeah, this would be the centralized location for, but also, that's a good point, but, I
So
guess.
the Ebbets Pass distribution crew would still report to Ebbets Pass. The barn up there would remain in operation. None of their equipment, I don't think, long-term would be stored here. Operationally, I don't see a big change for the Ebbets Pass crew, but
Okay.
defer to Damon on that.
Well, yeah, I think the one key change is, and it's not just for Ebbets Pass, but it's for Copper and Valley Springs as well, is with material purchases and then warehousing. So Mike, our purchasing agent, could then purchase here and then whatever.
Then
staff-
distribute
yes,
them.
Exactly, so we can manage the purchase and the cost more closely here with the centralized warehouse. So when they need new material, they're running low on repair parts, they can come here, pull from existing, and then we order here.
So we've had some long discussion on how the best way to put this project out to bid, and we were thinking we were gonna do 3 separate contracts. The first contract would be for site work, the grading, paving, and drainage. The second would be for the metal building and the concrete foundation that goes along with the metal building. And then the third contract would be for the internal walls, electrical, and the HVAC that goes with that.
Kevin, I got a question about the layout, the floor plan. It looks like the building is gonna be divided into, you know, from mechanics on one side to warehouse parts, whatever, on the other side. There doesn't seem to be a good way to get from one side to the other inside the building. Is that on purpose? I mean, besides walking through that shared office meeting area there.
So this is something we, actually, in his original design, Kevin had a corridor that went through there. We can still revisit that. We thought maybe instead of just having a corridor, hallway space, incorporating that to expand the shared office meeting room space, but that also being the walkthrough, but we can revisit that going forward. I also just wanted to use this item, if that's okay, and in response to that question, I wanted to use this item to make sure that the board was introduced to our purchase agent. So Mike Crank is in the back of the room there. He was a member of our construction crew and applied for the purchasing agent position when we created that position, and he's, 2 months in now to that position, I think, around there. And he's dove in head first. He's going to be involved in the design of this warehouse and doing a fantastic job. So I just wanted to make sure to introduce Mike to the board.
Right, well, we're absolutely thrilled. I mean, purchasing of equipment is just a whole new world, as you know, as you can recognize. And so we're just so happy to have you have that position filled by, such a qualified person. So welcome.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate you guys letting me come in here and listen. And I just want to say that this warehouse is pivotal to what we're trying to do as far as an inventory standpoint. Keeping things, we can keep track of what goes in and what goes out, and we can manage that inventory better, and we can utilize it more across the board as far as a district. So that's where we're coming from in this direction as far as the warehouse goes. if you have any questions, let me know.
Just for my own, if I remember correctly, you were already employed here and you just stepped up, is that right?
Yes, I came from the field, and so I've seen a lot of things that come in the field, and I can take what I learned as a warehouseman for decades, and then come in the field and see what I learned there, and then bring it all together into this warehouse, and we can use it to, better just improve the district as far as parts. He brought up the storage here. Bulk storage means bulk pricing.
Right.
We can improve, we can reduce cost, we can plan, he brought this up too, we can store, projected jobs that we have, we can have that stuff on hand, we can go through those things, we can keep better track of these things, and that's the goal of this warehouse and the plan.
Have you made an impact on our claim summary this month yet?
Yes, he has. He got a driver's license or something.
Yeah, I'm sure I did probably make a little impact on it.
Okay.
So, just case in point, we have a lot of leaks, as you guys know, especially in the Rancho Calaveras area. We buy a fitting that's, say, for a repair service line. We've had 120 or plus leaks that we've had to use these on. They're $33 a piece if you buy 2 or 3 cases of these. I did a quote with 3 vendors for bulk quantities of these for 20 cases. It dropped the price of this fitting $10 a fitting. So when you're talking about 200 fittings, that's $2,000. So we're better suited with the warehouse to do bulk storage, bulk pricing. We can have vendors fight, or not literally fight, but actually, they can maneuver. We can get price reductions on this stuff.
Yeah, they will fight. I mean, this day and age.
Yeah, they'll do everything they can to get that bid, and so we're, this warehouse is going to help work with that.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, as I say, welcome.
So we need to add an arena for cage matches into the
We do.
design?
I think that would be one of the first things that we do is bring vendors in and let them go at it.
Got it.
Well, it's great to see both of you guys here today, and I love the shirts as well. That very, very nice. But we've been talking about this centralized warehouse and a centralized mechanic shop for years, and it's just great to see it come to fruition and to have a warehouse man already on staff who's familiar with that job as well as what's going on in the field behind him. Great. It's also good to see another engineer in our department. Good, and welcome to both of you. And I love seeing this going forward. The one thing that we talked about earlier today was shared resources, mostly labor. Do you see an opportunity here going forward with that same sort of mentality of purchasing chemicals for the county, other utilities, and in I mean,
think that's something that we are going to discuss here in the next probably couple of weeks, as far as public purchasing and getting together, as a way to buy materials collectively with other agencies and get better pricing. I think that's something that's going to be discussed, I think, here in the next few weeks with meetings and getting better pricing that way. And online, having people fight for our business, and that's something I think we're going to do pretty quick.
Oh, great to see. Keep up the good work.
Have we shared this with the county, our facility, or?
We have not yet applied for a building permit, if that's your question. But we will.
And let me know if you have any problems. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Any other questions, sir?
No, I think, are you continuing with your,
Yeah, I got a few more items to go through.
okay.
Don't go too far away.
So the last item that I want to talk about was this project schedule and what we're looking at for making this happen. So we kind of pencil out a schedule. It's in the memo, but we look at the bid opening in between February and April. So we're projecting we could do, and then notice to proceed to the contractor May 1st. And then the first work would be grading, building the fill for the building. And then we got the concrete foundation, the metal building fabrication and delivery and erection, and then the finished asphalt paving around the building, and then the interior walls finishing in February of 2021.
And of course, that'll be subject to change depending on the weather and,
Yes.
supplies, receiving.
Yeah, we've reached out to several different metal building vendors and that type of stuff to kind of figure out how long it takes to get the materials ordered and that type of stuff. And that's kind of base our schedule on that.
Right,
So.
right. So this is, off the top, this is our schedule, but as I say, subject to change.
Kevin, did I understand that you were talking about, you talked about phasing this, but are you looking to get a separate bid from an asphalt paving company, that task wouldn't be covered under the general contractor's scope of work?
Yeah, we were currently looking at a three contractor option with the site work. The asphalt paver would also do the site work. They might have an asphalt subcontractor, but a lot of the guys would self-perform all that work.
Okay. And you're certainly, I think it probably goes without saying that you're thinking about the proper sequencing on that. I can see that the paving should be scheduled for close to the end, otherwise it's going to be torn up by the construction, so.
Yeah, we wanted to get the, up to the subgrade for the building so that and the drainage put in that goes around the building, so that the building contractor has adequate room to pour his foundation and that type of stuff and erect the building, so. There'll be asphalt paving that has to come at the end.
Okay. And I heard some reference to the fact that Director Davidson had sat down with you to kind of review.
Yeah, we
your
sat
assumptions.
down, he went through the drawings, he had some recommendations also, the estimated cost, which I haven't gone over yet, but we got a lot of information from him, from ballpark information that he had per square foot and that type of stuff. He came up with a kind of preliminary, that they have a program that designs these kind of buildings, and he gave us some preliminary drawings for that to help. So we were looking at the total cost would be somewhere around $672,000 would be what we think we could do as far as the budget, based on the information we got from him, and then based on some estimates for the site work that we did, based on the quantities and that type of stuff. And then I didn't really go over the elevations, but I think you guys seen that. This is kind of what we're looking at for the. This would be the side here that faces George Reed Road. So this is the side that you'd see from the road. We're looking at putting some translucent skylights in the ceiling, so you have a lot of natural light coming through there. And then we're still finalizing the construction. If we're gonna have overhangs and that type of stuff, because that's all. How wide they are and that type of stuff. We're working with Davidson to figure out what the most cost-effective way to do that before we send it out to bid. And then this west elevation here, we're looking to do some kind of, this is not really, this is kind of preliminary drawing, some kind of sign here on the side of the building that you see as you're driving up the road, maybe with our logo and that type of stuff.
No, you have an updated one.
What was that?
He's referring to the west elevation?
The west elevation, sorry, excuse me. The
Oh,
west
okay,
elevation.
there it is. I'm
Yeah, that would be the one
Yeah.
that would be right out here next to the boardroom. You'd see from the
okay.
parking lot.
Got it. Security, what are our,
If you look at the site plan here, it's kind of hard to see. I apologize, but there's a kind of an entrance right here that comes around the backside. And we were looking at putting like an automatic security gate here that would roll up, and vehicles come through that have the keypad or a key fob, and they would be able, so that it would be secure access to the backside of the building. And then there would be a little gate on the pathway here, with a chain link fence going, tying to the existing chain link fence it's on the perimeter here. So that would be the security. The front side would be access to vendors and stuff, so the vendor could pull up in the front and park the truck there, and then we could unload them in the front, or you know, if the tire guy shows up or whatever, you know.
Kevin, anybody else have any questions? If I could, first of all, ask you a question about the floor plan. You were talking about having the ability to run a truck through the warehouse and unload with a forklift. It strikes me as if that door was moved slightly to the left or west, that it would be beneficial to be able to get on both sides of a truck to unload. And under this arrangement, you couldn't. You could only get to one side of a truck.
Yeah, we looked at that configuration. If we moved the building further to the east, we could do that. But with the turning radiuses coming out of the roll-up door on the north side, you come up against the creek there.
Yeah.
So if you moved the door to the west further, you'd have a hard time getting a truck out through there. So we looked at a couple different configurations with having kind of two doors in the front of the building, the George Reed side, and no doors in the back. But talking with the warehouse, with our operations stuff, they preferred to have a way to drive through, and that's about all we could do as far as the location of the door, without moving the building on the property further away from the creek.
Okay, but there appears to be a retaining basin or something that goes down to 89, that rectilinear area that's east of the building.
Yeah.
Okay, so why does that have to be so large? I mean, couldn't you excavate it deeper and move farther east with the building?
Yeah, we could do that. We were just kind of trying to keep it as tight to the existing buildings we got here. But there's no reason we couldn't move it over a little bit and maybe redo some of the grading and make it deeper so that we could get a little bit, make it, right now it's pretty shallow and large basin there, to kind of catch some of the water that comes off this road here, and then also collect the water that comes off George Reed. Because the driveway over here, the 30-foot wide driveway, is the road slopes up as you go this direction. There's just got to be some way for the water to shed off of there. So, but yeah, we can look at that.
Okay, is this drawing your drawing? Did you prepare this, the site
Yes,
drawing?
I made this drawing up.
Good, that's wonderful.
And Russ can read it. Russ can read it.
Yeah, we had the surveyor came and gave us the topographical stuff, and then we overlaid it.
Yeah, there's some little nuances that I would like to question you about offline.
Sounds good.
Okay. Oh, one thing that I want to ask publicly here, on the south elevation, you show a couple of windows high in the west end of the building. I'm assuming that that's potential for a second floor?
Yeah, we were looking at a mezzanine there, so I didn't put the height of the building on here because there's some kind of discussion still on that. We were looking at the standard building comes 17-foot height, but then the roof girders that go across come down to about 14.5. So we were looking at the height of the building and then trying to position the windows where they'd be the right height for a mezzanine up there. So that's we're looking at the options for that, and we were working with Davidson on that.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out what makes sense. It doesn't sound like going in a little bit higher would be very, doesn't increase the cost by very much, so.
Yeah, he has said that consistently, that it doesn't cost anything to go up. So,
Yes.
and I can see the building having two different roof elevations. So you could have a higher roof on the west end and a lower roof over the maintenance bays, if need be. And then Jeff would be the person who would answer that question, but anyway, I'm very pleased. This is nice.
So, a couple of points that I'd like to make, if it's okay. First, Kevin has done a phenomenal job on these drawings. We've had several iterations of this. He's taken feedback from me, from operations staff, from a lot of different people, from Director Davidson, and he's, in a very timely fashion, he's incorporated those comments into these drawings. So just want to thank Kevin for the great work that he's done on this. The major changes from the last time that we gave the board an update on this, we were actually looking at two buildings, a maintenance shop and a warehouse as separate buildings utilizing more of the new parcel. We've shifted to this configuration because we think it would be less site work and a cheaper building, but still meeting all of the needs and the objectives that we have for it. So wanted to point out that that's probably the biggest change from the last time that the board saw it. So feedback on that would be welcome, especially the west elevation where we have the sign and the door there. It's going to be very prominent aesthetically when you drive into our driveway over here. You're gonna see that wall. Just wanted to raise that for the board, and I think the goal was to bring it up to the same elevation as this building.
Yes, very close to it. Yeah.
So we would have to fill some of that area over there, raise it up, and it would be on the same elevation. But that would be it'd be a very prominent feature. So board feedback on that would be welcome also. And then the financial piece. So in the cost estimates, you see, to me, seems like a very reasonable cost for all that we're trying to do. There are ways to reduce the cost. One of the suggestions that Director Davidson had was that we just do the shell of the building, hire a contractor to just do the shell of the building, and then over time, with our own staff, do internal walls, electrical, and things like that.
That was going to be one of my questions. Are we
So there might be some other ways to go about it that could potentially reduce the upfront cost of the contract. We'd have to take a look at the trade-offs there. Our staff is certainly capable, has the expertise, but they don't currently have the bandwidth. They're already, we especially on as far as our electricians are concerned, but the construction crew as well. I think any amount of work that we try to do in-house is going to slow the project down. And we have to be cognizant of the cost of that as well, the cost of our internal labor. So from my perspective, if we get bids back along the lines of what we've presented here, it seems to me a very cost-effective way to get this done and get it up and running and start realizing the benefits of the project sooner. It could easily, if we try to do it within portions of it with in-house labor, I could see us having to pull people off of this job to handle other district priorities, and this drags out. And I'd like to see it up and running as quickly as possible. But those are some of the trade-offs that we can consider in terms of cost, depending on what we see from the bids. In any event, the Fund 104 balance won't be adequate to cover the full cost of the project. The $130,000 estimated land sale revenue is still in question. That's uncertain at this point whether we'll have that or not. So we'll either have around $371,000 or around $500,000 in that Fund 104. I asked Rebecca to look at other sources of funding for this project, and she added the discussion here regarding Fund 108. The board policy on the reserve balance in that fund, I believe, is $8 million. So we're well over the minimum reserve balance for that fund. And it seems to me it would be a very logical source of additional funding for this project and a good use of that money. So that's why we presented that discussion here as well. But appreciate feedback from the board on it, because we would like to incorporate that feedback and get this out to bid if that's the direction from the board.
Well, one thing and again, we've been studying this and talking about this for years. I mean, three or 4 years at least, and at least since this building's been here. And one of the things we were talking about is being able to expand. I mean, to put a building on there that we can add to. And I think Director Davidson is, being the metal building expert that he is, has mentioned that several times. And I love the idea of highlighting, having a visual feature that you can highlight some, our emblem or our logo on the side of the building and have it as you come into this driveway to see that there. But I don't think that's nearly as important as being able to expand the building and use the space that we've got. And I know President Thomas talked about wanting a bigger lot, a bigger, more acreage, and even expanding this way instead of that way. But we've made this decision. We're not using much of this land. And I don't know if expand. And I know a lot of work has gone into this, and I hate to be, or don't want to be, saying it's not a good fit, because if this is what we need, this is what we need. But I'm looking 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, will putting this building in this space allow us to expand and use the rest of that parcel as needed to the best ability as we grow?
Yeah, so that was part of the reasoning for moving the building as close to this and using as much of our existing parcel as possible for this building. Was we could you can add on to these buildings, as Director Davidson has explained to us, so you could extend the length of this building. Or the thought was, over time, if we have need for additional facility or vehicle storage or anything else, we still have most of that new parcel. The more we move up onto that parcel, the more site work is required. But we still have all of that new parcel that we could utilize. If we need to add another facility up there, we can expand into that new parcel. So that was the reasoning for bringing this building as close to and utilizing as much of our current parcel as possible before we use the rest of that.
So we would be able to expand the building east?
Right.
East, make it longer, and then from there make it deeper, up the same building, or are you talking about two different?
I think
if we needed more space or needed more building
right.
area, more would we add to this building or put a second building up there?
So the thought that I had was that we would have a lot of room for expansion onto the new parcel as a separate building, and I don't know if we've looked at lengthening, if we wanted to add sections onto this existing building. It seems like that's probably a possibility too. But either way, it leaves us a lot of space to grow into as we need to add additional facilities. So we're just trying to make the best use of the space as possible.
Since we're going to get in there to do site work, grading, and drainage, would it help us at all, or work in our favor if we went a little bit further than this and took care of some of the?
So I could see us doing that by necessity, because we're going to need to borrow to bring the grade of the foundation of the new building up. We're going to need to probably borrow from, and so we'll be doing some leveling, I imagine, out of necessity. We're also, though, for this phase of the building, trying to keep the cost as low as possible. So I wouldn't anticipate doing any more site work than what's absolutely necessary. But I can certainly see us having to borrow some of that material.
Have you done a balance on?
Yeah, we'll need to bring in, what did I figure? About 200 loads of dirt. So we got,
Even with what you're generating, cutting into the hillside?
yeah, you have to bring about 2 to 3 feet in here, in this area right here to, and then the rest of the area in the back, this area needs 2 to 3 feet, and then over here you can pretty much borrow, and we're kind of creating a drainage swale here to send the water towards the creek, so we'll be able to borrow some out of there, but there'll still be a substantial amount of fill, but from what I understand, there's plenty of sites around here that you can get fill from the quarries and that type of stuff, the overburden and that type of stuff, so you don't think it'd be that costly to bring in materials, so.
Kevin, I have noticed over the last 10 years or so, kind of a new approach to these catchment basins to take care of your on-site drainage. And it's quite remarkable that they excavate deeply and they put in fiberglass devices underground to hold the water temporarily. Have you looked at the possibility of doing that instead of having the typical bird bath arrangement that you've shown here?
Yeah, looked at that a little bit. I think that's a lot of areas they use where they need for infiltration into the soil. They put those big basins under there and they put some pervious material there, and it allows the water to seep into the ground, and then it'll overflow when it gets to a certain level. At least that's the ones that I have more experience with. And then, but in this case, we can direct the drainage directly to the creek area here. So I think that'd be, if there's opportunity in the future, if we need the space, that you could do something like that. They have precast type steels from like Contact or whoever. They make the precast concrete, and then you could bury the basin.
Okay, well, just let me finish here. The next opportunity that we're going to have a full board here will be on the 11th of December. So what I would like to see is some what ifs, different, maybe a couple of different presentations about what the site layout could be in anticipation of some future building. Where are we going to put that? Director Ratterman and I have kind of both observed here that the only thing of immovable character that we've put on the new lot is that catchment basin. I mean, you've got the driveway and the paved area, which is subject to maybe being changed in the future. But I would just like to see some options. We're paying, was $185,000 for a lot, and we're only using 30% of it under this configuration. I'm just kind of throwing
Right.
out.
Well, we wouldn't, to be clear, we wouldn't be able to do this without merging these parcels.
Yeah.
And that process is underway right now. And then the thought was not that we're only ever going to use this portion of it. We'll have the rest of it to grow into, basically. So
Okay.
I think it's still.
But I think that the board would like to see, at least this board member would like to see what those future scenarios might look like.
Sure.
So that we need to have that information so we can say yay or nay.
And my comment is very, very similar to President Thomas's about the cost now, the cost today. And I think, Michael, you said it a couple times, that this is a less expensive way to get it up and going. Get it up and going now as quickly as possible. I don't want to be, more focused on time and a little bit of money than, and I mean, I want to look at 10 years down the road and what will we need, what possibly will we need, and I'd love to see what the other costs would be if we spent more time on site development now, and put the building in a place where it would be more expensive now, but a lot less expensive later. If that makes sense.
So let me clarify, though. I want to be sure I didn't characterize the effort. We weren't cutting corners to the extent that we weren't going to meet our operational needs and what we see we need going forward.
In the future.
So there were other, like I said, there were other things that we could have done to downsize this project. But we felt like then we would be sacrificing the benefits, the return that we would get from developing the site. So we feel like this is sort of the compromise of it does everything that we need it to do and makes the best use of the property with leaving us room for expansion. But we absolutely can bring back to the board options for ways that we can continue to grow into that property.
No, that's what I'd like, and even though we may end up with this, and this is a great, I mean, this will work. I think everyone agrees with that, and Kevin, a good presentation, beautiful drawings. I think this will definitely work for the district. We wanted to see what are the other things that you looked at to come to this? I mean, and that might help explain.
Yeah, and I would actually encourage Damon or his staff to hear directly from them, so that you're not hearing it filtered through me as to whether we feel like we think this will serve the operational need that we project for the next 10 years. Because I don't think we've sacrificed that in the interest. We are trying to be as cost effective as possible, but I don't think we've sacrificed the operational benefit of the project.
Maybe Mr. Crank can answer this question better, but in previous iterations of this layout, we've seen location for racking and for materials storage, gravel, sand, and we've never discussed it in depth, but I think that when we go out and do a tear out of a leak, and you create this rubble and asphalt and stuff that has to be taken someplace, there needs to be a spot here to bring that so that you can accumulate it and then haul off a 10-yard load of it later. But I don't see that material storage on this plan. Have we decided we don't need it?
We did talk about that, and we thought it would probably be a little bit more effective to have those materials on site. I mean, as we don't work here in San Andreas, to have, I mean, we have plenty of room for aggregate and rock, in Copper, in White Pines, in Valley Springs, that we could use those areas to store that types of material, so we have more room because we're limited on parking in the back, and maybe visit that somewhere into the future. But that was one of the discussions that we had. I don't know if we ever finalized that discussion though.
Because the cost of doing that.
Yeah, and I don't think we
Yeah.
were ever really contemplating bringing spoils
Right,
back
right.
here. We had, in the previous mock-up, there was a material storage option in the diagram. And I think that was more, I think the thought was we would potentially store new material here that could be then distributed. Even that, I think, is probably better done in the field at those different locations. But as far as the trench spoils, I wouldn't anticipate that coming back here.
Okay.
I mean, as far as the rock, we ended up having to haul it twice. You haul it here, and then they have to come and get it and haul it up to the job sites. So if you had it right there where it would work, then you're limiting, you only have to have one trip for us to use. If we had to come down and get rock here after it already got delivered here, that's twice the delivery.
Well, I was under the impression that some of our dispatch would be taking place from here. I see trucks out here. Are those new trucks, by the way?
There's a new truck out here, yeah.
That's a coming up later. Thanks for
Do we take
spoiling
it-
my surprise.
Do we take a tour?
Keys are in it.
They were. Okay. Any other questions here?
No, thank
But-
you very, very much, Kevin.
But please take heed of what I said about if you need to get this thing out for bid in January, February, we have to have some robust discussion on this on the 11th, right?
On what?
On the 11th of December.
We'll bring it back.
That's just my observation based on the timeline. Because right after that, January occurs, right?
Oh, good idea.
Did you want to take a break? Or no? Yes, no?
No.
No, okay. All right, we are down to our favorite operations manager. Item 6A, report on the October 2019 Operations Department by Damon Wyckoff. Welcome.
Good morning, Directors, President Thomas. I will work to be brief. So the October department report, a lot of work, a lot of operations work during this month was associated with public safety power shutoff, of which we had 4. And at the first meeting in October, I gave a presentation about the first PSPS event. And then we subsequently had 3 more. The largest one actually was the PS event of the 22nd through right about, it actually rolled right into the one of the 27th, 29th.
Yeah.
And that one was the entire service area went dark for that, essentially the 3rd event. So of the 78 plus minus generators we had operating during that event, we had issues with 2. So I would say that was a great accomplishment, and I would like to recognize the district field staff for their work efforts associated with the generators. We had one that actually had an issue with its fuel injectors, which you'll see in some slides, and then we had another that had an issue with some batteries. Incidentally, there was, as you can imagine, a heck of a lot of work associated with maintaining and assessing generators post-PSPS events as well, and a lot of costs associated with overtime and work efforts that we are seeking reimbursement for.
Well, just curious, how were the problems resolved? I mean, were there any new generators, or they just
Actually,
fix them?
So it was actually, we were able to take the generator that had the fuel injector issue offline because it operates a treated water pump station that doesn't necessarily need to operate continuously. So we could run the pumps, shut it down, basically rehabilitate the generator itself, kick it back on, and then we're back in action. And then the battery failure was just simply replace the batteries. So nothing akin to what we had in the first PSPS event, where we had the water pump that Mike was able to take down to Stockton and get a replacement the next day. And PG&E actually brought us that generator on site. So I always like to start off with the service line and water leak replacement efforts that go on in the Rancho Calaveras service area. So in the department report, you'll see there were 50 plus service line repairs in that service area, a total of about 110 gallons a minute saved. What I want to show you all here is that staff is really working now to, rather than jump in and throw a repair clamp on the service line, which still happens quite often, where, you know, when we have the opportunity, we want to replace the entire service line. And so what that does is help eliminate a failing service line altogether, because as you can see, this one was taken out of this hole, this trench. The water main is approximately where the cones are. And so this side of this service is going to the meter box here, and it has, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 10 full circle repair clamps on it. So the struggle, and I've brought this up a few times before, is that there's always the struggle between, you know, blow down, for lack of a better term, onto the service line and put a full circle repair clamp on it in a matter of minutes, and then jump to the next leak and make a repair, jump to the next leak and make a repair, rather than spend half a day or a whole day replacing one service line, only to come in to have more work orders associated with leaks. So our crew's working to split the difference in the Rancho area to great success. We have about 15 in-process service line leaks currently, and that's down from about 48 on average. As you can see, here's a crew member who's actually, we're replacing a service line by tying what he's got as the new section of service line, and he's strapped it to the old service line, and we're actually using a piece of equipment on the other side of the landscaping there to pull the service line through. So there's sometimes some creativity associated with service line replacement. And here you can see another friendly neighborhood rock on top of the service line. This is just to illustrate the existing backfill that lives on top of our infrastructure out in the Rancho area and the Copper area, incidentally. And then the picture on the right shows, it's kind of dark, my apologies, but here's a full circle clamp that was already there. And then here's 1, 2, 3 pinholes that are blowing water out of the existing service right there. So that would be another replacement. I'd like to highlight a project that essentially took almost all of the departments within the field staff everyone had a role to play. So mechanical, electrical operations, and construction worked together to replace a failed raw water pump in Lake Tulloch that feeds their Copper Cove water treatment plant. And it was a group effort. And so here's a picture on your left of one of our mechanics who's actually constructing. This is an intake screen that we could have purchased for about 25 grand, and we built it for about 4, labor and material. So what this contraption is here, as you can see, it's a modified trailer that's been bolstered with a tripod for a wire wheel on it, and this is an armored power cable that is connected to a pump, and this is a pump can with an intake screen. And so the existing pump that failed in the reservoir sits in a cradle, and we hired divers to go down and disconnect that apparatus and float it up. And we then dropped this one in. And the way construction and mechanical work together was, and electrical actually, is electrical wired the motor that's in this pump can to the armored power cable, and they put the spool on the tripod so that construction simply needed to just grab this portion, and as they moved it down the hill to the lake, the armored power cable unwound, and we didn't have to reconnect the armored power cable on the shore with divers waiting, and because the watertight connections take about 4 hours to seal, and so then we're sitting with a dive crew for 4 hours waiting for this connection to seal, and if it's not a great connection, we have to live with it. So this provided our electricians with the opportunity to really get a great seal on the connection, and then they could just roll it down the hill and we can install it. So here's some pics of the trailer and the apparatus, and then a large long reach excavator that we rented for the project that could actually lift all this equipment, because the armored power cable spool alone was 3,000 pounds. So it was quite a heavy endeavor. And as you can see, and so also there was a spare, we were able to put a spare pump in. So after we dropped that full apparatus in, we had a spare pump that actually was living at the Copper Cove maintenance shop that we took down to a mechanic, had it inspected, and we're able to place on an empty portion of the cradle now. So now, should we have a failure, we just simply need to change leads and make a connection with some divers, and we can be up and running. Whereas prior to, if we lost a pump, we were essentially dead in the water. Two birds with one stone. And as you can see, the picture on the left is the barge that would basically take the pump from the excavator, and then they would then float it down to the cradle, which was about 60 feet deep in the reservoir.
That barge must have tipped a bit when you put 3,000 pounds on the end of it. Right?
Yeah, I didn't get to see that actually, and I was hoping for a few pictures of that.
The barge was surprisingly small for this job. When we saw it, I thought,
Yeah,
you can do this with that little sun tracker,
right
huh?
here inspecting the
It was a party barge.
He has his Coast Guard hat on right there.
Yeah.
And so you guys have seen some of these pics before, but some more pics of the public safety power shut off. This is when they, PG&E's subcontractor delivered the rental, PG&E's rental of a 600 kW trailer mounted generator to the Copper Cove water plant so that we can make water. This is our mechanic, Mike Somerano, inspecting the radiator of the Copper Cove raw water pump station's generator. We did have issues with overtemp during a couple of the PSPS events, and he was able to clean it out. And this is the picture on the left depicts what he pulled out of the radiator itself. And actually, overtemp condition went away. So he was able to put that back in action. The picture on the left here is the automatic transfer switch that failed during that initial public safety power shut off. It's about a $20,000 hit to replace that, and it's been in operation since '96, as has this generator. And so then the picture on the right is the B tank generator that had the fuel injectors replaced. And here's a picture of Mike doing that work.
Damon, I have a question about that the power shut-off switch that had to be replaced.
Yeah, yep.
Okay, is this something that gets cycled monthly or something since '96, or how does that?
Well, so that's a great question you asked. So all of our generators, including this one, are on a monthly operating schedule, and they generally operate weekly. However, they don't operate loaded, meaning the power isn't actually transferred, the load isn't actually transferred to the generator all the time. Excuse me. With this generator, every quarter, roughly, every 6 months, roughly, it would be transferred to load and operated for approximately a couple hours. One of the lessons learned from public safety power shutoff for the district is that we need to do that more often. And Michael and I have talked about this, and we haven't been able to drill down in terms of what makes sense financially, with testing versus burning of fuel and whatnot, but there definitely needs to be a protocol that we need to develop for operating generators on a load for an extended period of time, perhaps it's a day, to understand how they're going to operate over time, because it allows us to understand any potential failures associated with the generator itself and pinch points within the system and areas of improvement. Now, with the automatic transfer switch, that happens in recognition of the condition of house power. So that device, and in talking with our electricians, should just continue to operate, because it's just recognizing no power or power on the PG&E side, and then it's just making that transfer. Our folks, and we haven't been able to kind of follow through with a bunch of legwork on this yet. The paint's still wet, for lack of a better term, but they feel that the initial public safety power shutoff transfer caused the automatic transfer switch to fail. So more to come on that. But if we were to manually transfer generators over time on a scheduled basis, the only way to get the automatic transfer switch into the loop would be to just kill house power. And we can do it that way. I am not sure whether or not that's the best way to test that operation, to test that transfer.
It would seem to me that that switch would be quite vulnerable in a brownout situation where the power was kind of not quite off, not quite on, not quite, it could burn the terminals up pretty quickly. But.
Yeah, and you make another good point. I've asked the electricians to work on an assessment of, because we do have some phase protection throughout the district. However, I don't have a good understanding of how comprehensive that is, because we did lose a phase monitor for that very reason in copper at our lower cross-country lift station during the 4th PSPS event. So one thing that we did learn as a result of these events to that point is that often if we're going to have power issues, at least through these efforts, it was in copper, and it was a result of either PG&E taking the system offline or bringing it back online. There wasn't anything associated with district work efforts or any other ancillary items. Oftentimes it was when they were re-energizing or de-energizing. So we need to better understand that. And then another one to bring to light is that the district did obtain approval from the regional board to go ahead and implement a pilot study to assess whether or not this technology can remove nitrates from the wastewater, which is one of the looming regulatory constituents that we're going to have to look at better removing from the copper wastewater, particularly the Title 22 water that goes to Saddle Creek. So the beginning of the month, a vendor called Triple Point brought out their nitrification unit that is supposed to denitrify the wastewater and remove nitrates. And I can't explain in detail the technology, but T1 and T2 are full of little styrofoam discs that have a bunch of surface area that critters like to live on and live in, that like to consume the nitrates. So we're mixing the water within T1 with all these little styrofoam discs, and then we're stilling the water in T2, and then the outflow is denitrified. So this is obviously a very small scale application. I think it's a half a gallon a minute, but it does look like the technology works. So we're gonna submit a preliminary report to the regional board the middle of December, and a final report is due in May. And I think it'll provide the district with some tools to use moving forward and when we anticipate what's next for copper.
I took a tour with Jesse recently, and I seem to remember that this, the cost of doing this is somehow related to a long overlooked bill or something that came in, and this is in lieu of actually paying a fine, is that?
It's in lieu of the civil penalty that we received for a notice of violation. So a portion of what we otherwise would have paid as a fee or a fine went to this project instead.
But the event that we're referencing is decades old, isn't it? Or at least a decade?
When was the NOV? Do you know?
Yeah, that's correct. I want to say it was 2008,
Okay,
2007, 2008, yeah.
before I got here.
Right, yeah. Me too.
Me too, right.
Yep. And so the last picture, it shows the intake piping going into Tulloch. And then what was once the outflow attractive nuisance that allowed water from the stilling well of the Copper Cove Raw pump station to flow back into the lake, which now no longer needs to operate because we run the new pumps that were installed via VFD, so we can match demand pretty much the whole time, the entire operational run. Any questions?
You wanna
Very
explain what-
nice.
All right.
Thank you for the,
I just,
always pictures, I like pictures.
Hey, I
Yes.
like it too. I'm always messaging the guys, hey, picture.
yes, your report, yeah, you were right. There were 53 items down in Jenny Lind. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
And just, how do you assemble all this, Damon? Because this is quite extensive. Do you, one of your staff,
Yeah.
Callie?
So I think it's been a little while now, and I think we've all gotten to the point of just basically taking notes throughout the month and keeping a running tally of work efforts completed, because I usually will ask staff to provide me with a list of items about a week ahead of the deadline for the board report, and oftentimes I just get an email, and then here you go, and it's just bullet pointed items, and I think, I think most of the supervisors out in the field recognize the value associated with providing some accountability associated with what they do. And they just, it's an easy, ready-made tally. It's not a heck of a lot of work actually to put together. They do all the work, and so it's a testament to them, really.
Because I can remember at one point, they used to do their trouble reports, and they were, fourfold? I mean, copy here, a copy there, and so now it's really condensed and easy to...
Yeah, and we have a constant back and forth about what I would like to see. So I think we're in the groove now, and I see the way they might depict a work effort, and I understand what they mean. So we're all speaking the same language now. So I think it speeds the whole process up.
Well, great, it's just really thorough and...
There's an item at the bottom of page 1 here where it says, item number 2, you sat on an interview panel for the county. You're not looking to go to work for the county.
Oh, no. This was actually a peer review request that actually Jesse Hampton sat in on for the county, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
He's not going anywhere either.
Just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Vicki, you have any comments on this report? No? Okay. We have a general manager report?
Can you pass those up? I don't have pictures. I'll work on that. I do have a written report, but I'll touch on these items. And I want to start just because we had a all-hands staff meeting yesterday, and really appreciate Stacy and her team doing some recognition for the veterans that we have, and we have a lot. So I just kind of wanted to bring that to the board's attention. Tony Apnip, Chris Reese, Chris Kinney, all served in the Army. Scott Lunsford was in the Army National Guard. John Applegate was in the Marines. Pat Burkhart, Bob Hanley served in the Air Force. Rick Griffin, Clayton Lang, Bob Carter all served in the Navy. And Randy Scheit and myself served in the Coast Guard. So Stacy, I thought, did a really nice job. She made us some really nice CCWD veterans hats. So I just wanted to make the board aware of that. I wasn't aware really until yesterday that how many.
How many are there? There's
I
quite.
think that's, let's see, 12.
12, that's wonderful.
That's a pretty significant proportion of our workforce. So I just wanted to
And while you're on that subject, we'll thank them for their service.
yeah, absolutely. And so I'll run through my update real quick. Damon covered PSPS on the operational side for the most part. I just can't say enough about how phenomenal the work effort was, including the planning, the preparation going into it, the emergency action plan that Damon drafted and put a lot of work into. It worked. You know, we obviously had some things that came up that we couldn't have anticipated. That's always going to happen, and our crews did a phenomenal job of responding to that. But for the most part, the plan that Damon had in place and that our guys executed, just keeping the water and wastewater service going without electricity, it was remarkable. Our staff deserves a lot of credit for that. I also want to acknowledge Joel, who did a very good job we had a lot of public outreach before and during those events, and he handled that very well, especially with the emergency event in Copper, where we really needed to make an urgent plea to the community to conserve water, and he was in touch with the radio stations and all of the print media and Facebook, and really pushing that message out. We went through 4 of those PSPS events. As Damon mentioned, the 3rd and the 4th sort of overlapped, and managed to maintain service throughout those events. It came at a significant cost, and we're still in the process of tallying those costs and then doing what we can to pursue reimbursement. Remains to be seen whether that will be successful or not, but the county did declare emergencies for all 4 of those events, and so we're pursuing funding through that process. If there's any possibility of reimbursement through PG&E, we'll pursue it. I'm not optimistic on that front, but it's a significant expense that we're going to have to pay more attention to it going forward. We knew going into this year, in the development of this year's budget, that there would be some expense for PSPS events. I don't think we anticipated the scale. So we will, that will affect the budget going forward. We also, I'll just highlight on the PSPS front, Aqua has approved proposed legislation from the Energy Committee that initially started as addressing an enforcement problem. So some of the regional air boards, air quality boards, are enforcing runtimes, stringent runtimes on generators even during PSPS events. So water agencies are faced with the dilemma of shutting off their generator and discontinuing service, or keep the generator running and get hit with a fine from the air board. That happened up in North County, or North Bay area water agencies were faced with that exact situation. We had been aware of it starting several months ago, and so the Energy Committee at Aqua, we drafted a proposal to address that specific issue. And since then, The proposal that Aqua approved does focus on that narrow issue, but since we've now been through these PSPS events, we all have a lot, I think we all learned a lot, and we have a whole litany of new complaints. So I would anticipate that legislation turning into a vehicle for potentially much more comprehensive PSPS legislation next year, and look forward to being a part of that. So we also had our Blue Lake Springs regular check-in on the water purchase agreement up there. All positive feedback for the most part. The one topic of the main topic of discussion was whether or not at what point they would want to pay for potentially additional capacity, and whether they would want to prepay for that capacity, or set up their own reserve fund for that, or if we would have a structure for it here. And they're going to look into those options and get back to us. But for the most part, it seems like the agreement is working well. Mountain County's event on Friday, President Thomas and Director Underhill were there, along with Director Cicada, myself, and Joel. Really informative event on forest management practices, and then in the afternoon, to the state's long-term water conservation mandates, which Joel has been very closely involved in. The CCWD got I feel like a lot of recognition for that work. We're one of 17 agencies in the state that are participating in the pilot study. And the way Peter Brostrom from DWR described that effort is they're trying to model the whole state off of those 17 agencies. And there's 2 in the mountain counties. There's us and South Tahoe Public Utilities District. And he admitted in the meeting that we present a challenge to their design because of the trees. And that was something we had been aware of in advance, and they're now grappling with it. So we'll continue to be involved in that process. Senator Borges' meet and greet event here, I thought was well attended, and it gave us a good opportunity, especially it was in the midst of the PSPS events, so we were able to share our thoughts with him, and felt like we had a receptive audience with him and his staff. Section 219 funding, I didn't bring a copy of it, I meant to do that, but we did get a letter of support from Congressman McClintock after our DC visit for our tertiary treatment project in Copper. He sent the letter of support to the Secretary of the Army, and we're hoping to get a similar letter from Congressman Garamendi. We're going to continue pursuing. At this point, we're sort of waiting for the Army Corps to develop their work plan, but we're going to remain, we're going to proactively monitor that and make sure that we hopefully will end up in that work plan.
Well, Michael, weren't we also supposed to get one from Senator Harris and Feinstein?
Yeah, so we're working on that as well.
Okay.
Yeah. We're working on a couple of CAL FIRE grants for forest management around the regulator in West Point, or Ratterman Reservoir, as some people like to call it.
That unnamed one? Is that
the unnamed one.
Just throwing it out there.
And also in Arnold, around our wastewater treatment plant, where the local I think it's the Fire Safe Council, Pat McGreevy, they have a project that neighbors our property. We'd like to implement a similar project on our property and do some forest thinning up there. And then we also, a big part of the discussion at the Mountain Counties meeting was the lack of economic use of the forest products. It's something that we've talked about and kicked around here among water agencies in Calaveras County. And it's a problem. And so we're looking at, there is a grant available for planning and design of the biomass power plant that we're going to do some investigation and see if it's a good fit for us. But anything that we could do to support the development of industry that could utilize forest products, we want to support. And we're also in discussions, as I've discussed with the board in the past, with MID, potentially restructuring that relationship around New Hogan to generate some more hydropower revenue. And part of that effort is advocating at the PUC to get the REMAP program reopened as soon as possible. We have a receptive audience at MID. They're interested and open to the prospect. So Peter and I are working on a term sheet that would get into the details of what needs to happen to the contract and how that would play out over time. So there will be more to come on that in the near future, hopefully. The vehicle lease program is finally delivering the goods. We did park one of the new trucks right out front for the board to see. We have received 6 of them so far, with 4 more to come, I think, in the next week or so. And then we have to do some work to them before we get them out, ship them out to the field. But we anticipate them to be all in service in the very near future. And it just, I mean, to do that big of an impact, that big of an upgrade to our fleet all at the same time is pretty remarkable. So improvements in safety and operations, decrease in maintenance costs. We're seeing the benefits of that program already, I think.
Who is putting in the radios and, gussying up the trucks?
Damon,
Our
you
force-
want to
our-
address that?
Our staff?
Yeah.
Great.
Yep, so we did have a few radios that we had Columbia Communications install on a couple of the newer trucks because we had brand new radios on site, but with the rest of the 6 that were delivered, we take radios out of existing trucks and we have mechanical staff install them in the new trucks.
Oh,
Yep.
wonderful.
And so Mike actually manages purchasing the decals and works with the Stacy in terms of HR, in terms of understanding the safety requirements and what's needed for each truck. So before they go out into the field, they're decaled, they have the radio installed, and then they have accident report kit, parking cones, flare strobes, and all the decals, safety decals on the back are installed as well. So we have 2 out in the field actually right now, and then we look to have a 3rd out by Friday.
Very cool.
Unfortunately, we received notice from Forest Meadows Golf Course that they will not be, they've done seasonal closures in the past, and they will not be reopening this time around. So it looks like the golf course will cease operations. Hopefully there'll be a buyer that can keep it going. But in the meantime, our immediate concern, the district's immediate concern, obviously, is the operation and maintenance of the treated effluent storage pond and the spray field. And we've reached out to SGM already and had some conversations with them, and they're on the same page in terms of, no interruption in that operation.
What does that mean? That no interruption? If they're closing on December 1st, they continue to own it, then do they have it on the market to sell? Are they continuing to be there and operate sprinklers and mowers and?
I don't know what they're going to do in terms of maintenance of the golf course. I don't know if they're going to continue to maintain it as a golf course.
Right.
But what we do know is that we need to be able to operate it. We need
As a
them to
spray
continue
field.
to operate it as a spray field.
And that's what I'm asking, is the
Yeah.
mowing around the sprinkler heads, for example, should be done, unless wouldn't be an effective spray field.
Right,
but-
so we'll continue to monitor that, but the discussion we had with them was that they're gonna continue to operate the spray field, they're just not gonna sell rounds of golf on it anymore.
Are we making contingency plans
We are.
to have the billing for the power transferred over to us and stuff.
We're working on that as well as just making sure that we have access in the event that we would need it.
Okay.
Quick update on the county trench policy. We submitted a comment letter on that a month ago. I think this was the latest version of it. None of the comments in our most recent letter were addressed in the final version of the policy that the board adopted last Tuesday. The most troubling provision is essentially a lifetime warranty that creates sort of an arbitration process, arbitration light, I guess. I think is a flawed policy, and we made our thoughts known to the county, and they adopted it regardless. So we will continue, though, to advocate for improvements to the policy, and I've had some discussions with supervisors since then already. So hopefully we can encourage them to make some improvements. Couple of things to look forward to: the SB 998 lockoff policy that you've heard a lot about over the last couple of years, kind of like Peter's sustainable groundwater plan. This is Joel's 2-year project. They're coming to fruition around the same time. We anticipate a draft of the policy at the Finance Committee later this month, and a version of the policy for the board to consider approving in December. And we're also in the final stages of developing an RFP for a strategic planning process that I'm looking forward to. So we should hope to have that out this month as well. One other thing that I failed to get onto this document, but we've had discussions in the past about increasing the number of on-call staff at the district, and that was put on hold for various reasons and negotiations with field staff and the union, but we're back on track with that and working with the union created an on-call committee, so we hope to move that forward here in the next few months. So we would
So
have.
that means you would, spread it out.
That's right. So we currently only have one on-call person for the entire district. And so we would add, so there would be a total of 4. It would create 3 new on-call positions. 2 of them would be treatment plant operators, and they would be separated by, downcountry and upcountry treatment plants. We'd have a district-wide collections and mechanical on-call position, and a district-wide distribution on-call position. So, but among the 4 of them, we feel like we'd have adequate on-call coverage, and yeah. So we've been developing that plan. We look to implement it in the next few months. I think that's about it for my update. Any questions?
Yeah, I've got a question about this. We're going to send out an RFP for development of a strategic plan. We've talked about that amongst us in the past, but I didn't realize that we were going to hire a consultant to help us with a strategic plan. Are we going to do that, at least the initial part of it, in a, I don't know, what do we call it? Not a training session, but you had a word for it. Workshop, yeah, board workshop.
So those are, I think, separate discussions. I'm working on upgrading, adding to sort of an expanded version of my work plan, and then a board retreat or workshop that we've discussed.
That was one of my questions.
Yeah, this is a separate process that could easily, they would feed into each other, I think. And I think it would probably be helpful to do the board workshop in conjunction with or in advance of this strategic planning effort to make sure we're incorporating. But in any event, the object of the strategic plan, yes, would be to bring in a consultant. It's something that we budgeted for. to incorporate input from all levels of the organization, and from the board all the way down. And it's something that I think we've been missing. The most recent planning document that we have was a business plan that was created in 2011, and it's not particularly useful anymore. So I think this is something that's going to be worthwhile. I think the process in and of itself will be educational, and then hopefully we get a good working document that comes out of it as well.
Okay, was that, any other questions? Nope. I just have one question. You talked about this vehicle that's out here. We have a couple of closed session items we have to discuss. Can we
You want to
go
do a
look at
test drive first?
Yeah. Can we go look at the truck first?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. So the next item on the agenda is the, huh?
We're not going to look at the truck.
I'm going to go look at the truck. Damn right.
After closed session, we'll go look at the truck.
No. Oh, I want the keys.
I'm going to stay out of that one.
The chair has some prerogative.
I mean, that,
Okay, we'll talk.
We'll talk? We can just arm wrestle right now. Okay, board reports. We'll start with our upcountry.
Upscale upcountry?
okay, well, up country, we were all just devastated because of the death of Tom Sullivan.
What?
Tom Sullivan, who sits on the Abbott's Pass Fire District Board. Oh, you,
I didn't know.
oh, okay.
Wow.
It was
Oh, how sad.
on the 9th. He passed away. He and his wife had gone out for dinner to the Moose. They were coming home and coming up their stairs, and all of a sudden he just
That's sad.
lost it and died right on the deck. And that was a real shocker. It is just devastating up there. Tom and I, we've been friends for years, and we shared a birthday. So that is, really, I mean, I guess I'm still in a state of shock.
No doubt.
Did you know Tom Sullivan? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Vicki.
Boy.
So anyway, that's real. Okay. Let me see. Number 2, you had received the letter from White Pines for the beach expansion.
I haven't, but if I could just follow up on the Tom Sullivan item, there is a memorial service
Right,
planned on
right.
Saturday at his past fire district.
So you did receive a letter from
On the beach,
beach expansion?
yeah, I've talked to Mr. Kafka about it, and we spoke about it as well, and we're gonna, we have a draft letter to respond to that issue, and then there's a second issue regarding a spring that sounds like needs some maintenance near the lake, and Peter was up looking at some other issues at White Pines on Friday, and I think he was going to try to connect with Bill about that, but I think he was out of town. So we're going to try to get up there and take a look at the spring and see what needs to be done.
I'm meeting with him tomorrow.
Oh, Peter's meeting with him tomorrow.
Oh, great, great. Okay. We were together, okay, wait a second, I'm missing, no, that was another meeting we were at. I went to the VOAD, this is the Voluntary Organizations Active in Disaster. And I was concerned because District 3 was the only district that wasn't represented in that organization. And I was pushing for representation by CCWD or from CCWD, and I really I'm backing off because it is a voluntary organization, like the animal control or the food bank and groups like that. And we're there because of OES, you know, that's the role we play. But I think periodically I will check in with the VOAD, but I don't think that we really need to be sitting at the table. And as I say, I'm gonna work with Marita and see if we can't find a volunteer from District 3 up at Abbott's Pass. That's a long ways to come to go to a meeting, as you know. We're traveling some distance, and finding someone to volunteer is a whole other issue. Okay, so we heard about PSPS, and since it was a planned event, therefore it's not a disaster. And that's one of the things that I had to wrap my arms around. Right? So, it's treated differently, and as far as the state is concerned, and
It is, although the county has declared a disaster for those events. So
okay,
we
well,
will
I was
still work
looking
through
at
that
it, or
process.
hearing it from
Yeah.
up above, okay? So PSPS, from the meeting I attended, what does my note say? My note says, does what the county cannot do, whatever that means. Well, so much for that. Okay, you had a town hall meeting down in Valley
Yeah,
Springs?
thank you so much for reminding me. I can't believe I forgot to include that in my update. We did, and only about 10 people showed up, and for the most part, I think the presentation went well. Joel and Damon and I each gave a portion of the presentation. Director Davidson was there, and about 10 residents came. And we went through our presentation, we handled some questions, and then we were there for probably an hour afterwards, just having some follow-up discussions with the folks that came out. We plan to take that show on the road, continue that in each of the different areas. So we don't have any other town halls on the calendar yet, but we'll work with each of the directors to do
Okay,
that.
so you are gonna take it
Yes.
to every
Yeah.
district, okay, because, I had been to that one meeting where I met that woman, and she said she had gone to the,
Yeah, and then she had the opportunity to stab me in the arm the next day. Flu shot clinic.
okay, and I had just cut out this one article, and I'm sure we've talked about this, when we have a power shutoff, what that does to wells, and so many people. I hear more and more people who have been impacted because of the power situation with their wells, and it's just,
Yeah, and we're actually going to review our policy for the launch of fill stations that we have to see whether or not we need to adjust that policy for PSPS events. It's been a complicated issue in the past, but I know during some emergency events, like during the Butte Fire in 2015, we opened them up and told people to take water.
right, to go and help.
So whether we do that during PSPS events or we have some other way for residents who are on wells to access those fill stations is something we're going to take a look at.
Because we have a disaster, and if we open up our supply of water, I know we had a question about whether or not they had to show IDs of where they lived, and,
It gets a little bit complicated, but there's some ways to address that. So we are going to review that policy and revisit that.
Okay, well, that's it.
Okay, on the PSPS front, I was pleasantly surprised. I got my PG&E bill and had a $100 credit on it.
Oh, did
And it was called a customer satisfaction adjustment. And I don't know, I had read about it in the paper just that morning that that PG&E had relented and their average credit was gonna be, for everyone that was affected, would be about $122. And that might be, and I know that Governor Newsom was pushing for $250 for commercial accounts and $100 for residential accounts, and that might be the combination between those two, but it came through. I mean, it was good to see. There was something positive coming out of this thing, and I got to think that going through bankruptcy, giving every single, this 30, 35 counties, and a lot of people in those counties, and then how much money that they're spending on the credits, number one, and then how much money they lost by not selling power for 4 or 5 days. I mean, it's got to be, their books got to be just crazy, what they're going through. Anyway,
I'm the only one I've heard that got anything like that.
No, I got it too.
Oh, did you?
$100?
It was like 100 and something, yeah.
Oh, more than 100? Okay, I'm not quite sure what it's based on, but anyway. Mountain counties, we got our program tomorrow in Murphy's. We'll be meeting for the tour for the Mountain Counties Board. Will take place tomorrow morning. We got the big reception at the Murphy's Hotel tomorrow evening, and then on Friday morning we got our Mountain Counties Board meeting, also at Murphy's Hotel. That's all I got for now.
Who's the keynote speaker?
Our keynote speaker for the reception tomorrow evening on the 14th is Dave Egerton. You might have heard of him before. He's the executive director of Aqua, and he's still there. By the way, he's holding on to that job. Yeah.
And he's gonna, of course, be at the reception.
He will be at the reception
tomorrow night. Yeah, it was really great to see him. I just was so happy. And so for the people who can't go to the Mountain Counties meeting tomorrow, there's a tour of watersheds, and that's being put on by who? TwoCare? TwoCare. And so I talked to Steve Kafka, who's pretty instrumental in putting that all together. So we're meeting at the Black Bart Playhouse, 8:30. Since we can't go to the Mountain County.
Wow, you're right around the corner from our meeting. Hope our buses don't collide. Also, we mentioned in the reception and the tour, wanted to thank Matt and Downey Brown, as well as Condor for their sponsorship. It's co-hosted by CCWD. I'm on the Mountain Counties Board, and Barbara Balin is TUD. We're co-hosting the event, but it's being sponsored by Downey Brown and Condor. Thank you very much again.
Okay, are you done?
I'm done. That's.
Okay, I just want to mention that Bertha and I did attend the Mountain Counties meeting last Friday, and Michael touched on some of the things that were discussed there. The monitoring of the outdoor watering use, I mean, it just really struck me as being quite laughable that they're looking for statistical accuracy that they may develop to 6 places past the decimal point, all on guesses. And that's just mind-boggling to me that they're taking themselves way too seriously. Also, you know what? The County Board of Supervisors has been working for over 13 years to do a general plan update.
Yay.
We should acknowledge that.
And I was there to witness it, and among about 10 people in the audience, I thought that there would have been 110 people, but one gentleman stood up and said, "You have worn us all out." You know,
I think that might be it. Nobody believed it would actually happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
So, and everybody, including the members of the board, recognized that they were approving a plan that, by most measures, has some flaws and some warts, but they gave a commitment that they're going to launch in immediately to, to revisit some of the things that most people are most upset about, and hopefully they'll come up with something that will address those concerns. Also tonight, talking about county issues, there's a newly formed Park and Recreation Committee that I have been asked to participate in, and we're having our first meeting tonight at the board chambers here at 5:30, which I'm hopeful that there will be some meaningful accomplishments with that group.
I understand you have some money to spend.
Yeah.
Really?
That's been the impediment in the past for
That's
a
great.
long, long time. So hopefully we can dust off some of the things that we've always wanted to do in this county. So I think that I'm going to be going to tomorrow night's meeting at Mountain County. That's at 5:30.
Yeah, we can go to that one.
Now, do you want to come pick me up? Huh? You want to drive down and come pick me up? Probably not. Okay, I think that at this point, we need to
I'll send you a
just,
picture from the bus, if you'd like.
okay. Need to mention that our next meeting ordinarily would be on November the 27th, but we have decided to cancel that so that we can have preparations for the Turkey Day on the 28th. So that our next meeting will be on December the 11th at 9 o'clock. And Bertha, how's this working out, the 9 o'clock
Oh,
meeting
I
for-
think it's great. Look at, we're going to get to go home at noon.
Maybe.
Well.
Okay.
Oh, well,
Okay, so at this point, the board will
we're going to
adjourn.
talk fast.
We're going to talk about closed session items. We have a conference with legal counsel on existing litigation. We have another conference on real property negotiations.
And Robbie
so-
Creamer won't be there.
He won't be there. How can we do this?
Property negotiations, wow.
Unbelievable. Okay,
But we have another name in there, Peter Martin. Wow.
so you don't want to go see a truck, huh? We'll do that.
Let's do it afterwards.
We'll do that later. Yeah, you can just go kick the tire.